We're deep into 0.5, and yet there are just truckloads of builds that are obliterating the game. They're insanely fun, affordable, and yet no one's playing them. Yeah, we can't have that. So in this one, we're covering some of the best and most fun builds out there that barely anyone's playing. I'll have links to all of the builds in the description, along with links to the creators, so you can check them out. Let's get started. For the first build of the day, we're checking out a build that sure is off-meta. It's so off-meta, in fact, that I couldn't find a single person playing anything like it apart from me and my man Bashowers, whom I've been working on the build with. Make sure to check him out in the description. This is kind of hilarious, though, seeing as it's capable of hitting for 200 million damage, it's immortal, and it has insane clear. I'll get into the math a bit on that first statement, but first let's just check out the main interactions. So, the main skill of choice here is Whirlwind Lance. The basics of this skill is that it shoots out a couple of whirlwinds that collapse when you run into it. You can have a total of 6 whirlwinds. Moreover, you can boost its damage by spending frenzy charges, and in turn granting it an extra stage above the normal 3. Now this skill has been hot garbage up until now, but something has changed. That's because we can now pair this skill with a gemling, granting us access to advanced thaumaturgy. Because just look at this shit. If we quality this bad boy up, we will be able to gain upwards of 80% more damage per whirlwind stage, and will always have 4. But we also gain extra elemental damage from quality as well. I've got around 100% extra from my quality. This is on top of the 50% we already get from ground effects. What's neat about this is also that this league we have the Taming Prismatic Ring, allowing us to benefit from all elemental ground effects at once. Meaning, just from stacking a bit of quality and doing some quick napkin math with a few conditionals, we're looking at 70 million damage. And I'm running an extremely tanky mapping setup. If you weapon swap, then you double that. Then add in a better gear, and you're looking at 200 to 300 million damage. And I'm already one-shotting pinnacles in full groups, and I'm freezing the game when nuking map bosses. So, yeah, a pretty good build. For mapping, it's also fantastic. We just throw out a Whirlwind Lance, and as we're moving towards it, we use Glacial Lance in the meanwhile for extra clear. Because the added benefit of playing Gemling is that we have reduced chance to consume frenzy charges. You can actually push it as high as 100%, which makes handling frenzy charges extremely easy. I may make a full guide for this one because it's just fucking bonkers. But for now, make sure to check out the short-written guide in the description for more details, or check out Bashowers' channel. Now, if you're looking for one of the strongest melee builds in PoE2, this one is honestly pretty disgusting. And the funny thing is, if you just look at the gameplay, it almost seems too simple. Slam shit, they die. You collect loot, ooga booga. You're sitting at over 200,000 effective HP, so if you've got a donkey brain, then that's actually pretty much the only thing you'll have to do, as you're completely immortal and barely need to think. The mapping revolves around Sunder, which clears nearly half the screen with a single slam, while Earthshatter takes over whenever it's time to peg bosses. Thanks to aftershocks, branching fissures, and splitting ground, a single Earthshatter can shotgun enemies with multiple overlapping hits, leading to some absolutely ridiculous single-target damage. Until GGG nukes it, that is. For additional speed, the build also has a really clever skill speed setup that you can utilize in most of your own melee builds. By weapon swapping into Amor Mandragora and repeatedly casting Ferocious Roar, you're constantly spending Rage. That permanently keeps Druidic Prowess stacked for around 30% skill speed, while also generating endurance charges at the same time. So you're basically yelling at the air every few seconds, and somehow that makes you attack 30% faster. Peak PoE design, mana is also not really a thing anymore. Once you get a constricting command with the 4 surrounded modifier together with Defy 2, the build essentially ignores mana completely. This is pretty much mandatory for any melee build now that stacks attack speed, seeing as how god-awful Leech is this league. But the surrounded mechanic also grants a massive amount of attack damage, attack speed, and defenses, making it one of the biggest power spikes the build gets. For mapping, Bone Shatter ends up becoming your movement skill. It feels surprisingly smooth once you get used to it, and honestly faster than a lot of actual movement skills. Now, Sunder gains a huge bonus against armor-broken enemies, but can't reliably break armor itself. How the hell do we solve this? Well, instead, Harbinger of Madness automatically handles the armor break for you, letting Sunder immediately benefit from its payoff, while also generating endurance charges for Ancestral Cry. Pretty sweet. The gearing progression is also really straightforward. You can get started on a fairly reasonable budget with items like Sadist's Mercy and Thrill Steel, then gradually scale into one of the strongest melee builds in the game once you pick up Constricting Command, Flesh Crucible, and the rest of the endgame gear. Overall, if you're looking for a build that clears ridiculously fast, deletes bosses with giant slams, and is tanky enough to ignore half the mechanics in the game, this is easily one of the best warrior builds of the league. One of the biggest surprises this league has to be Earthshatter Gemling, not only being one of the fastest builds in the game, but also dishing out humongous AoE and damage at the same time. You're simply flying through maps with Whirling Slash before dropping gigantic Earthshatter explosions that chain across the entire screen. The entire build revolves around scaling Earthshatter in several different ways simultaneously. Gemling's alternate qualities massively increase both the damage of your spikes and the chance for powerful aftershocks, while cast on Elemental Ailment automatically creates frost walls for you as you fight. Breaking those frost walls grants huge amounts of extra cold damage, giving Earthshatter enough damage to instantly freeze and shatter entire packs. Once Herald of Ice starts chaining, one explosion quickly turns into 20, not including the one in your pantaloonies, and before you know it, the whole screen has disappeared. Lovely. Movement is also a huge part of what makes this build feel so good. Instead of Bone Shatter, this version uses Whirling Slash as its primary movement skill. It's incredibly fast due to the added quality, and the built-in knockback lets you plow straight through packs instead of getting body blocked every 2 seconds. Defensively, it's way tankier than you'd expect. Arctic Armor, Scavenged Plating, and Gemling scaling stack together to produce absolutely ridiculous armor values, while Loreweave enables your Herald of Ice Chain explosions by letting chilled enemies shatter as if they were frozen. The end result is a character that comfortably clears even heavily juiced maps while feeling surprisingly safe for a melee build. The neatest part is that none of this requires mirror tier gear to get started. The creator is literally using a weapon that costs around a divine orb, while still clearing some of the hardest content in the game. Obviously, you can invest far more into the build later, but it's one of those setups that already feels incredibly powerful long before you reach that point. Overall, if you're looking for a melee build that actually feels fast, has massive explosions, excellent survivability, and doesn't require you to mortgage your stash tab before it starts working, Earthshatter Gemling is easily one of the most satisfying builds of the league. Next up, we have what might be the most PoE build in this entire video, the Coomer build. If you're tired of playing the same old caster builds over and over again, this one is honestly one of the coolest builds I've seen this league. On paper, it's an impending Doom build, but in reality, it's basically a machine gun that fires chaos explosions about 5 times every second. The entire build revolves around abusing impending doom in a way GGG almost certainly didn't expect. Normally you have to wait for your curses to expire before Doom Blast triggers. Yeah, We're not doing that. Instead, Spell Cascade together with Doedra's Undoing constantly overrides your own Despair curses, instantly forcing them to expire and triggering chain after chain of Doom Blast explosions. So rather than waiting around, every cast immediately turns into multiple overlapping detonations that absolutely obliterates your GPU. The build gets even crazier once Trickster's Shard comes online. At first glance, the gem looks terrible because it says your supported spells deal 50% less damage, but that's only true for the mimics it creates, not for you. Those mimics start casting Despair alongside you, creating even more curse overrides, even more Doom Blasts, and enough explosions to make your GPU start questioning its life choices. Peak PoE design. Instead of playing a traditional witch or occultist, this build actually uses Gemling Legionnaire. It gives you massive gem levels, absurd amounts of quality, and enough cast speed to hit the sweet spot for Doom Blast's internal cooldown without wasting stats. Bossing also has a really fun extra layer. During downtime, you quickly channel what the creator calls Chaos Blast, essentially a flame blast that's fully converted into chaos damage through Black Flame Covenant. Since the build stacks so much global gem quality, Flame Blast gains an absolutely ridiculous Ignite multiplier, letting you melt bosses while Doom Blast continues exploding underneath them. It's a surprisingly elegant way of squeezing even more single target damage out of the build. Overall, this is probably one of the most mechanically satisfying caster builds I've seen this league. It's fast, surprisingly tanky thanks to its massive energy shield setup, and once everything comes online, the gameplay basically turns into dropping one curse and watching the entire screen disappear. So if you enjoy builds that make absolutely no sense until they suddenly make perfect sense, this one's definitely worth trying. If I had to recommend just one monk build to the average player, it'd probably be this one. This Tempest Flurry setup is honestly one of my favorite builds of the league. And just in case you're already on a monk playing, let's say a Whirling Assault build, I can recommend throwing it in the fucking trash because Rickwhip's version is the real deal. He's immortal, got upwards of 20 million DPS, and screen-wide clearing. You're basically flying through maps with Whirling Assault, instantly teleporting onto priority targets with Staggering Palm, and then shredding everything down with Tempest Flurry before dropping Tempest Bell to completely annihilate rares and bosses. And that's really what makes this build feel so satisfying. Every skill naturally flows into the next. Whirling Assault keeps you moving while applying exposure and setting up packs. Staggering Palm lets you instantly jump onto dangerous enemies without losing control of your character, and once you're in position, Tempest Flurry takes over. The build also abuses one of the strongest interactions available to monks right now. Tempest Flurry fires out a constant stream of projectiles while you're attacking, and because you're scaling attack speed so aggressively, the amount of projectiles flying across the screen becomes kind of ridiculous. Combine that with Herald of Thunder, constantly chaining through packs and maps basically clear themselves. It also looks cool without being complete eye cancer, which is nice. For bossing, this is where Tempest Bell comes in. Instead of relying purely on flurry, you simply drop your bell underneath tougher enemies and continue attacking. Between the bell echoes, Tempest Flurry hits, and all the additional lightning damage flying around, the single target damage ramps up incredibly quickly, allowing you to quickly nuke them down. And if you don't, no worries, they're stun-locked anyways. One thing I also really like about this build is how smooth the movement feels. Whirling Assault isn't just a movement skill, it actually clears monsters while you're traveling. You're constantly dashing through packs, repositioning for Bell, teleporting with Staggering Palm, and immediately continuing your combo. The whole build feels incredibly fluid, and after playing it for a while, most other melee builds honestly start feeling sluggish. Despite how fast it plays, it's also surprisingly durable. Permanent guard uptime, high evasion, solid armor, endurance charges, and a healthy energy shield pool make the build much tankier than you'd expect from a character moving around this quickly. You still need to dodge the obvious one-shots because, well, it's PoE, but it definitely isn't made out of paper. The best part, though, is that the build doesn't require mirror-tier gear before it starts feeling good. It scales extremely well as you invest more currency, but even on a relatively reasonable budget, it already has fantastic clear speed and enough boss damage to comfortably handle 200 deli and all the other content in the game. Overall, if you're looking for a monk that maps incredibly fast, has excellent boss damage, feels ridiculously smooth to play, and doesn't require a PhD in Path of Building just to understand what's happening, this is easily one of the strongest all-around builds of the league, and my personal favorite. Alright folks, that's all for this one. Check out the creators and build guides in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.